Hi everyone, it's Anna here from Journeys. I'm here to introduce you to our next 4-week series for our Journeys Gem on Monday mornings. This one is about trust. So we're going to be talking about trust in relation to Brene Brown's research and some of the research that she found as part of her process of research as well. So this morning, what I wanted to do to kind of introduce our topic is, firstly, I want to give you a definition of trust that Brene talks about in her book, Rising Strong. And the definition actually comes from Charles Feltman's work, and he wrote a book called The Thin Book of Trust. I love his definition here. His definition of trust says this. Feltman describes trust as choosing to risk making something you value vulnerable to another person's actions. And he describes distrust as deciding that what is important to me is not safe with this person in this situation. And I think that's a really good definition of trust. Firstly, that trust is we actually choose to risk what it is that's going on in our life, or maybe it's choosing to risk the safety of our children or the safety of our own lives when we get into a car. Whatever it is, there's lots of areas in our life where we talk about, where we just naturally do things that actually is trusting something or someone with our safety and our vulnerability. And I particularly like this part where it talks about choosing to risk making something you value vulnerable to another person's actions. So whatever it is that you value, trust is actually going, I'm putting this person or this thing or this story in the hands of someone else, and I'm risking that they're going to treat me right or they're going to respond well. So I can't determine someone else's actions, and that's what trust is, being able to do something or say something and not knowing what the response is going to be. So I guess attached to that, part of what Brene found in her research is that, when we look at trust, it's such a big thing. When we say something like, I don't trust you anymore, I can't trust you anymore, it's a massive statement, and it's usually hurts when we say that, or it hurts the other person, or it hurts our relationship. So part of what Brene did, two things came up in her research. The first one was the story of the marble jar. And if you haven't heard it, the basics of it is that Brene's daughter came home from school one day and said to Brene, I'm never going to trust anyone ever again. And obviously Brene's curiosity ignited, and she said, what happened? And Ellen, that's Brene's daughter, said, I told some of my friends something that was really important to me and something that had been happening to me, and by the time lunchtime came around, everyone in the class knew. It was so bad that my teacher had to take marbles out of the marble jar. And Brene said, what's the marble jar? And Ellen said, the marble jar is where when the class is making good decisions or we're doing the right thing, the teacher will put marbles in the marble jar. When the class is making bad decisions or doing negative things, she'll take marbles out of the marble jar. It was at this point when Brene thought, that's like trust. That's like the trust relationship, the relationships that we build and how we know who we can trust or not. And so Brene went on to explain that to Ellen, and I think it's really helpful for us too to get an understanding of who can we trust and who can't we trust. So trust is like the marble jar. When the people in our life do positive things or say nice things or show empathy, do small things that actually make us feel cared for and loved, we can go, right, that's a marble in the marble jar. When something doesn't go well or someone responds differently, you might take marbles out of the marble jar. So the idea is thinking about who are your marble jar friends. Added to this experience that Brene and Ellen had, Brene found in her research that trust is built in small moments. So when you think about what sorts of things can happen in a relationship that builds trust, it's thinking about small things. Trust is not built in big, massive gestures of trust. Trust is built in those small, everyday moments. When someone tells you something that then they say, I need to share this with someone, this is really hard for me. or when they call and say, I had a really bad experience at work today, I need to talk to someone. Or when someone texts you and says, hey, I know you had this really important meeting, or you weren't sure about this school test, or this exam was coming up, whatever it was, I just wanted to check in and see how you're going. They're all types of things that can be marbles in the marble jar, that can be elements of trust, things that happen in our life that can build trust. The other part in Rising Strong particularly that Brene discovered was there are actually 7 elements of trust. And so she developed an acronym called BRAVING, which really pulls apart the elements of trust. So we're going to unpack those in the coming week. But the first one is boundaries. The R is reliability. The A is accountability. V is for vault. I is for integrity. N is for non-judgment, and G is for generosity. So when we think about who can we trust and who can't we trust, and what's actually going on under the surface around this issue of trust, we can look at those elements and really pull apart what is it specifically that is going on in this relationship that we can address by looking at those elements of trust. So that's a really quick and brief overview of trust. And we're going to, for the next 3 weeks, I'm going to start pulling apart the BRAVING acronym. So next week, I'm going to talk about boundaries and reliability. And then in the 3rd week, when I look up, I'm looking at my cheat sheet. Then we're going to look at accountability, vault, and integrity. And in the last week, we're going to look at non-judgment and generosity. So I hope this has been helpful and got you kind of thinking a little bit more about trust, that it's not just this big thing, or it is a big thing, but actually when we break it down, it's more about small moments that actually build trust. So I look forward to talking to you next week about boundaries and reliability. Have a good week, everyone.